In the stark, unforgiving arena of a television courtroom, where real lives and real debts are dissected under the bright, pitiless lights, a financial and emotional bomb was about to detonate. A bomb built not of malice, but of desperation, centered on a mysteriously precise sum of keys 9,990, a number that was one single, solitary dollar away from the threshold of a major legal battle, a clever yet desperate gambit that would now be laid bare before the formidable and unflinching Judge Judy, whose legendary gaze missed nothing and tolerated no fabrication. A case that began not with a contract, but with a terrifying medical diagnosis that shattered the world of a man named Michael Schaefer and his desperately ill wife, Eleanor, a woman whose presence in the courtroom was a silent, powerful testament to the suffering that had precipitated this familial clash, a clash with Michael's dear-own sister-in-law, the plaintiff, Susan Boucher, who sat with a posture of wounded expectation, believing the money she handed over was a lifeline she would one day retrieve, while poor Michael saw it as a final, desperate gift from family who had witnessed their near-total financial collapse. The proceedings launched with Judge Judy, cutting straight to the heart of the matter, her voice a blade of calm authority as she addressed Susan Boucher. Ms. Boucher, can I see the bank records from Chase for your checking account, please? This simple request was the first thread pulled in a tapestry of financial ruin and disputed intent, and after reviewing the documents, Judge Judy turned her formidable attention to Michael Schaefer, his face a mask of weary stress, and posed the question that would unravel everything. All right, Mr. Schaefer, now, you want to tell me what you needed this money for? Michael began to speak, his voice heavy with the memory of trauma.
Are you following me?
Well, it goes back to August 2013. My wife started feeling very ill.
They were paying for you when you go
but
to
a
jail.
Judge Judy,
Unless you
a master of pacing and focus,
Did you pay for your
immediately
own jail?
halted this journey into the past, commanding,
Then Bert
I
paid
don't
to
want to
keep
go
you in
back to
jail. To keep
2013,
a cell over your head,
forcing
to keep
Michael
food
to snap
3
forward
times
to
a
the
day,
heart
to
of the
take care of your
crisis,
medical care, to
the
take
moment
care
their
of your
lives
clothes.
were
The
irrevocably
state
broken
paid for
apart
you.
by a word,
So why didn't
a
you notify
disease,
Social
a monster
Security
called
Disability
Wegener's.
that your check should
Okay,
stop?
so now snap forward.
Listen to me. That's
Michael
not my question
continued,
to you.
the
My
word seeming to
question is
catch in his
Social
throat.
Security Disability
She's been
is designed
diagnosed with something
to
called Wegener's.
take care of you because
The
you
name of the
can't
disease
work.
hung in the air.
Did you work when you
Ugly
were in
and
prison?
foreign,
No.
a specter of
do?
unimaginable medical
have a
terror.
prison job?
He
I
explained,
couldn't get a
his
prison
voice
job.
gaining
Why?
a shaky
Because
momentum born
there's
of
a
painful
long list
repetition.
of people.
And
Did you
Wegener's
try?
is treated
Yes,
with
I was
chemo.
on that list.
And those
You were on
chemo
the list.
treatments
What
are,
did you want to do?
they're not
I
covered
wanted to
entirely by
do
insurance.
the,
And they are
washing of the
$36,000 every
floors,
treatment,
sweeping, and
4
stuff like
times a
that.
week
Well,
for
why
5
can't you do that
weeks.
when you're out?
The numbers were staggering,
Why can't you do that when
astronomical,
you're out?
the kind of figures that
Because you
belong
can do
in
it in
corporate
prison. Why
budgets,
can't you do
not a
it when you're
family's
out to make
financial
money
planning.
instead
And
of
he laid out the
collecting disability?
horrifying math.
Yes, I understand
So
what
out of our pocket is that amount of money.
You understand what I'm saying?
And we had to do it
I know you
consecutively
understand what
3
I'm saying.
times.
If you think that
But
I'm going to give you
Judge
back
Judy,
Social Security
a
disability
human lie
checks,
detector
even if she
honed
was
by
your payee,
decades on the
while
bench,
you were in prison that I
immediately
was
pounced on a
paying for,
critical
got another thing
inconsistency,
coming.
her voice sharp with skepticism.
wish
Just a second.
Social
I want you to
Security's
understand
gonna
what
have
you
a new
just said to me,
administrator.
Mr. Schaefer.
Pay careful
It's
attention.
completely different
When
from what you
somebody
said
is
to me in your
incarcerated, their
answer. You
disability
said you had to
payment
pay
should stop.
$36,000 4
Somebody's
times a week for 3 different
incarcerated,
rounds of
welfare payments
treatment.
should stop.
Is that what you're
When
telling
somebody
me?
is incarcerated,
The pressure was
foster care
immediate and
payments should
intense.
stop. We don't
The
have to pay
spotlight of her
twice or
scrutiny
3
burning
times.
away at his
Once
story,
is bad enough.
forcing him to
We understand
clarify,
each other.
to correct. No, the treatments were $36,000, and that's what the treatments were. And our out-of-pocket was $6,000. This clarification was crucial, and Judge Judy Bao meticulously recalculated. Okay, well, you forgot that. So you're telling me that you had to pay $24,000 a week? Michaels affirmed, correct, and the judge pressed further, for 3 consecutive rounds of treatment. Is that correct? But the details were a labyrinth of suffering and expense. With how Michaels sounded clarifying, it was 4 treatments. It's 4 treatments in 1 week, and the timeline was established by his wife's soft, pained interjection. Every 6 months? 3 times, leading Judge Judy to the devastating total, every 6 months, so that you had to pay approximately $75,000, a sum that Michael confirmed with a simple, shattered correct. And when asked over what period, he revealed, That was over 18 months. A year and a half of financial hemorrhage. And is that why you needed this money? Judge Judy asked, and Michael conceded, that was a great deal of it, yes. But the judge, like a bloodhound on a scent, wasn't finished. What was the rest of it? Unearthing yet another layer of medical expense. Well, also there, she had to do hyperbaric treatments for 30 days. Those were as well $2,500 every single day. A fresh avalanche of cost. $75,000 for just 1 month of this additional vital therapy, pushing the family ever closer to the abyss. It was then that Judge Judy asked the questions that revealed the true depth of their sacrifice. Do you own your own home? And Michael's would answer, we do, was followed by the gut-wrenching query, did you take a mortgage out on your home? To which he delivered the most telling blow of all, we sold our home, a statement that spoke volumes of their utter devastation. A fact Judge Judy underscored with quiet gravity. Because of this? And Michael's simple, devastating reply, because of this, painted a picture of a family who had lost not just their health, but their foundation, their sanctuary, everything they had worked for, all sacrificed at the altar of saving Eleanor's life. It was in this context of total ruin that the disputed money entered the picture, and Court Judge Judy turned her attention back to the peculiar amount, the 9999, a number that now seemed less like a sum and more like a carefully calculated legal strategy, asking Susan Boucher, it's an odd amount of money, $9,999. Could you explain that to me? Susan, seemingly genuine, claimed, I don't know where they came up with exactly that amount of money, but Judge Judy knew the answer lay with the borrower, not the lender, and she turned back to Michael. Where did you come out with that amount of money? Michael, looking trapped, could only offer a hesitant, Your Honor, before being pressed to answer, which he did with a stunning admission of strategic planning. I thought that would be the best amount in case we ever had to reclaim this money. It would be a lot easier to go to a small claims court, any amount under $10,000. So that's why I just lowered it by $1. The audacity of this calculation silenced the room for a moment. This was not the random act of a desperate man, but a deliberate, clever manipulation of the legal system's boundaries. A premeditated decision to keep the transaction just under the radar of a more complex court procedure. A fact Judge Judy noted with a tone of dry astonishment, by $1, and Michael's quiet. Yes, ma'am, sealed the impression that this was a loan disguised, perhaps even in his own mind, as something else, a grant with an escape clause he himself had engineered. After instructing him to have a seat, Judge Judy then turned to the core of the contractual dispute, intent. She asked Susan Boucher the fundamental question, did you expect to be repaid? And her Susan's what answer was immediate and firm, yes, Your Honor, and she provided the promised timeline that had undoubtedly given her hope. He told me that in 3 months, he was going to give me back the loan. This was a direct, specific promise, one that Judge Judy immediately put to Michael. Did you ever tell her that? And his response was a portrait of a man who knew the promise was an impossibility from the start. I wouldn't have told her that. I didn't have any money to be able to tell her that. I told Michael actually that snapping forward, when they started telling me that it was a loan, that if it was a loan, I would have never accepted it, because I wouldn't have been able to pay it back. Here was the tragic crux of the matter. 2 conflicting realities existing in the same space. Susan Boucher operated in a world of promises and repayment schedules, a world where money, even in large sums, eventually returns. Michael and Eleanor existed in a post-apocalyptic landscape where money only flowed in one direction, out, vanishing into the bottomless pit of medical expenses. A world where the concept of repayment was a cruel joke, a financial fantasy they could never hope to achieve. To probe the current reality of the lender, Judge Judy asked Susan Butcher a piercingly personal question. "How much do you have left in your savings account now, Ms. Butcher?" The answer was a whisper of its own financial pain. About 1,700, revealing that her generosity, or what she saw as an investment, had come from a place of limited means, not vast wealth, making the loss all the more acute for her. Then, in a moment of profound and quiet empathy, Judge Judy returned to the quiet, suffering figure of Eleanor and asked the question everyone wanted to know, "Is your wife better?" And the answer that came from Eleanor Hunt herself was a soft, heartbreaking dagger. "I am not." 3 words that carried the weight of all the suffering, all the spent money, all the lost dreams, confirming that the financial catastrophe had not even purchased a guarantee of health, only a chance, a fighting, painful chance. It was then that Susan Butcher, perhaps feeling the moral ground shifting, seized an opportunity to speak. "Your Honor, can I say something?" And upon receiving permission, she presented what she believed was her trump card, the tangible evidence of the debt's existence. "He gave me a check for February 28th, 2016, for $2,500 for the loan." Judge Judy, ever the meticulous investigator, demanded, "I'd to see it." But as he to Susan I'd tried to elaborate to frame the evidence, Judge Judy silenced her with a sharp, commanding, "Shh, shh, 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 sit, don't do that," establishing that she, and she alone, would interpret the evidence. She then examined the check, and what she found was perhaps the most damning piece of evidence in Michael's Nidorino favor, revealing a level of acknowledgement that complicated Hun Susan's count case. "Well, you gave her $2,500, sir, in February, and you wrote in that balance $7,500. This notation, balance $7,500, was a written admission in Michael's own hand that he owed a remaining balance, a powerful, seemingly incontrovertible piece of evidence that this was indeed a loan he was in the process of repaying, a fact that would seem to seal his fate and guarantee a judgment for Susan Butcher. But in the complex, emotionally charged calculus of this case, where a family was financially annihilated by disease, where a home was lost and savings obliterated, where a woman was still sick after unimaginable suffering, the cold, hard fact of a written balance on a check might not be the final word, for Judge Judy had to weigh the letter of the law against the overwhelming weight of human tragedy, the promise of repayment against the reality of utter destitution, the clever legal strategy of wow 9999 against the desperate life or death need that prompted it, leaving everyone in the courtroom and every viewer at home on a knife's edge, waiting for the final, piercing judgment that would determine whether a man who had lost everything to save his wife would now be forced to pay a debt he could never possibly afford. The lesson for every listener and viewer is stark and profoundly important. When money changes hands between family, especially in moments of extreme crisis, the line between a loan and a gift can become dangerously blurred, leading to heartache and fractured relationships that can last a lifetime. Always, without exception, put the terms in writing in a clear formal agreement that both parties sign, specifying whether it is a loan with a repayment schedule or a gift with no expectation of return. This act, though it may feel cold or distrustful in a moment of emotional need, is the ultimate act of family preservation, protecting both the giver from financial resentment and the receiver from the unbearable burden of a debt they may never be able to repay, ensuring that a lifeline in a time of medical and financial disaster does not later become a weapon that destroys the very family bonds it was meant to strengthen.